everybody for joining me this morning. Today's session is going to be really exciting. It's about branding. So we've got guys that are experts in the market when it comes to this. And so they're here just to share a bit of information and tips and kind of tools on how you can actually speak about your brand a bit better. Obviously, you guys are all doing different things and there's different ways that you can kind of speak to that brand. So we've got Megan joining us today from the Fine Group. She'll be facilitating today's session. We've also got Sherry on the call. Thanks, Megs. I was going to say, please can you just wait for me? Also got Sherry on the call, also from Fine Group as well. And they'll both be here today just to run the session. I'll still, as usual, be here just to kind of answer any for good-isk questions. But really, today's session is more around branding and marketing, something that I'm not really an expert on. So I think I'll hand over to you, Megs, and then you can just introduce yourself and your team. And I think maybe your organization as well. I didn't want to speak out of term. So I think you're the best placed person to kind of speak on what it is that you guys do and what the session is about today. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you, Zamo. Yes, my name is Megan Nethercott, and I'm from an organization called Fine for Good. Fine for Good comes out of a stable of companies that work under the Fine Group. And essentially, we are a brand and communication consulting firm or partnership or organization, whatever you want to call us. And the organization has been going for 25 years. Real heart for healthcare. That's where a lot of our time is spent, is in the healthcare space and other complex regulated environments. So my academic training is from a brand and marketing perspective. And we probably have dug in every corner of the branding chain and the value chain. So we spend a lot of time in insight gathering. So from a marketing and communications perspective, the more relevant and the more accurate you can be is often around how much you can understand your market. So as a brand strategist, a lot of my day is spent in insight gathering, looking for those gems, looking for those human truths that we can use to form campaigns around. Back. We spend a lot of time thinking about what brands look like, what brands sound like. And today, what we wanted to take you through was really the tip of the iceberg and just an introduction to when we say the word brand, what on earth does that mean? And what are some of the disciplines and some of the methodologies and ways of thinking that we can start to use this concept of a brand to really do the important stuff, which is to grow organizations. So what I will do is I've got a presentation today. I have put some pause moments in where there will be space for questions. I would just urge you to use the chat where possible. If you have a question, I might not get to it immediately, but drop it in there. I know interaction is sometimes hard on these large forums, so I'll ask you to pop some thoughts in the chat. If you don't mind, just to mute yourself, unless you have a question. All righty, so without further ado, let's get into it. So I'm just going to post my presentation up there. Hopefully you can all see. All right, so as I've said, we have a series of modules actually. This is the first one in various spaces and places around the branding environment. And I think we use this word brand a lot, and it's become very nebulous. Some people love brands, some people see them as big corporate monsters, but every organization has the opportunity to become a valuable brand. But I think we must use the word brand and communication really as a lever for growth. That's what we want to do. We all want to grow, whether you are a large corporate, whether you are sitting in the for good space and the NGO space and doing the very, very important work in our world. We all want to grow. And our understanding and our lens of the world is that the use of brand principles and brand discipline is a real vehicle for growing your organization. So probably the place to start is to say, what on earth is this thing called a brand, okay? And why should we care? Why should we even think about ourselves in this for good space and in this NGO space as a brand? Sometimes when concepts are rather large and rather messy, it's helpful to start by articulating what they're not. just so we all get on the same page. And brands are often synonymous with brand identity. But I have a provocative thought that a brand is not just your logo and not just your colors that you use or what we would sometimes call as a look and feel. Absolutely, it's a mark, it's a signifier, it's an identifier that the world knows you by. It's part of the mix. But I would urge us all to say that just a consistent set of colors and a logo on a page doesn't quite make us a brand yet. How do we know this? We know this because brands, even the biggest, most successful brands among the world today, have undergone huge evolutions from a brand development perspective. We take Apple, for example. We went from a dude sitting under a tree to a very slick, very refined corporate identity that shows the evolution of the business. Brands change all the time. Something closer to the for good space is even the UNICEFs of the world. Logos and brand identities are important, but they morph over time. It's a lot around what the design trends of the moment are, around how well known you are. If you look at Instagram, they wanted to talk about kind of the use of photos and imagery. So back in 2010, when they started, almost quite a retro look and feel, they've evolved that brand identity to where we are now. Big players in the market, look at the Googles around kind of where their design trends were. And they've gone so far and they've become so iconic that actually now they don't even use their logo. A lot of the time, they just use that G, and we know exactly what that is and exactly what that stands for. So, absolutely, to think about your brand logo, to think about your brand colors, and to think about your brand's identity is important. But I would urge us not to get stuck there, because the real magic of a brand and the discipline of branding can take us so much further. So, okay, if it's not just about getting ourselves organized from a color palette and a logo perspective, we've got to have that. I'm not discounting it, but what's more? What's under the surface? Then if we've got our identity sort of thought about, often what organizations do is they say, okay, well, it's about the thing I create or it's the service I give. And to an extent, again, I'm not throwing all of this out. I'm saying it's part of the mix, but we haven't got to the magic of what a brand can really be. If you think about a product or a service, we often say that products and services are created on a factory floor, a coding room, in your case, in the beautiful spaces and spaces you work. But the thing about a brand is it's not actually the thing you make or the service you provide. It's the part of your organization that is living in people's minds. And so it's a really tricky concept to understand that actually the person who owns the product or the service doesn't necessarily own the brand. If we have a conversation about each of your incredible organizations, I may have a view of that organization that is quite different to what is sitting in the reality and on the ground. And the discipline of branding, what it does, if we do it correctly, is it translates some of that magic, and it gives me kind of consistent messages around how to form my idea of the brand in my own mind. So, okay, if we've come to understand that we got to get logos and colors sorted, but not quite the whole story, if we've got to acknowledge that we've got to create some kind of perception that sits beyond just the service that we offer or the product that we're giving, what language can we start to use again as a kind of a base exercise to get us all on the same page? I I want to use an iconic brand. Someone who is in healthcare, I always think, oh, is Coca-Cola the best place to start? But regardless of what we think about their ingredients or what they've done, they are one of the world's most iconic brands. And what's really interesting is if you think about the essence of that, a brand, strip out a lot of the stuff, the superficial stuff on the surface. What Coca-Cola does incredibly well is they are consistent. Okay. So whether you are drinking in Shanghai, Mumbai, Dubai, Johannesburg, you know what you're going to get. So a brand is fundamentally an expectation that is met. There is consistency either at a global level or wherever you are operating in. And it's this idea of a promise of constant delivery. And I would urge you to, my belief is that it's not just iconic global products that can follow this set of rules. We can all have it in our own organizations and our own businesses, and we'll get into some of the principles. But if we start to think about an expectation of constant delivery, or a promise of constant delivery and an expectation met, I don't know, it is many moons ago now, but there was a very iconic branding individual who led an organization called Apple for many, many years. And I always use the story. I was not there. I wish I was. But he gathered all his marketers and all his communicators from around the world. And he said to them, right, we've got this fabulous thing. It's doing incredibly well. Tell me Tell me, what is a brand? And because they were marketers and they were experts in their field, many people stood up with these fabulously verbose nonsense answers. And he said, actually, you're all wrong. Fundamentally, we can strip the word brand into one concept. And a brand fundamentally is about trust. So I know the session's called Branding 101, and I know that we will get into some of the methodologies and the tools that we use to create these things called brands. But what we're actually talking about today is how can we take some of our expertise and show you how to build trust in your organization. So I'm very comfortable if we chuck out the word brand for the rest of the session, and we talk about how are you building trust? Where are you diluting trust? How will trust enable you to get more funding, to have a bigger voice, and to differentiate yourself in a very, very competitive market where we're all vying for funds, and we're all trying to get a piece of the pie. So again, as a 101 principle, the way we think about trust is really coupled into two main components. We'll touch on them today, but if we just even start to think about the principles of this and dividing our time and energy thinking about two specific things, we're on the road to being world-class branders. So the first lesson around trust or branding is that you've got to think constantly, and there's a duality in this. You've got to jump between two components. One is this concept we were talking about earlier around an expectation met and a promise of constant delivery. How are you across all your channels? So the service and the spaces that you play in, I know, are very, very diverse. Whether we in food security, HIV, maternal health, and wherever we are, whether we're in climate change, what are those components of your service offering that can look, sound, and feel the same across every single interaction? Because brands have a tricky way of behaving like human beings. And if me as a human being show up very differently with a very different story every time you meet me, you start to not trust me. And you start thinking, what on earth is this woman talking about? What is the central core thing that I can base my trust on? And again, we'll start to unpack some of the principles that we use in branding to get to that consistency and reliability. But how can you be the same? How can you be the same whether you're showing up on a social media post, in a case for support, in a funding proposal, your staff members, huge components of your brand? How can you all say the same things? Absolutely, everyone will have their own flavor. We know social media is very different to a very lengthy, in-depth funding report, but it can all have the same paintbrush and feel on it. So when we talk about building trust, we have to talk about this concept of reliability and consistency. Doesn't always feel sexy, doesn't always feel like the kind of shiny lights that people talk about branding, but it's hugely important. And we'll take you through some of the principles to start getting sort of single-minded and consistent messages. But what often happens in organizations that are on this journey to becoming world-class brands is we can get stuck in reliability. We can get stuck in thinking that if I just get all my fonts the same and I get all my colors the same and I use the same headline, I'm there. Okay. Absolutely. It's hard work. It's a lot of the hard work, but you have to also leave space for delight. So there's this formula of trust being made up of reliability. Do the thing you said you're going to do and do it the same each time. But then how do you add delight? How do you let people know how you're doing it differently to the others in the market? Saying that across all channels. What is that magic? What is that magic that we often call in a branding context stickiness or memorability? And I have the absolute belief, and I will end with a clip, and I'll let the cat out the bag now, pun intended. The ad I've chosen to show you of what I think is the most incredible campaign is cat food. Okay. So I want to put on the table now that if cat food can do it, in the spaces and places and the incredible work your organizations are doing, anyone can have this opportunity to create delight and to create something different. So principle number one from a branding perspective or a trust building perspective is how do we run this parallel process of building reliability, but also understanding what delight looks like. I think we've spoken about that, but I think that the word to point out in this slide is consistency. Absolutely, we've spoken about from a branding perspective. Professional, for sure, that's our entry into the playing game. But considered, I think considered communication is a really interesting concept, and we work hard in all our brainstorms, in all our thinking, is how can we be very, very mindful of how this organization shows up. Um, so trust, we've spoken about this. Trust really is about building better relationships. So often people will come to us and say, yeah, but I'm not sure I want to spend money on this branding thing because what I actually need is more money in the bank. And we'll go, but those are not opposing thoughts. Trust or brands help people understand who you are, help people understand how you show up in the market. That ultimately leads to relationships. So again, I've spoken about this, is really if we can start to think of our organization, and often this is an exercise we go through with new clients in our world, is if you thought about your organization as having a persona, we call it a brand persona, doesn't matter about the jargon, but how would they show up? Who are they? How can we continually build trust in this persona so people understand who's showing up at their door, what they can expect of that persona, that brand, and how they can learn to interact with that. We know that as with a human being, a single mistake can erode that brand trust. And so that's why that concept of being considered is so important. So again, just some introduction, kind of getting us all on the same page from a language perspective. But we are of the firm belief that if we start to use some of these principles, and we have done this for many, many, many organizations, that if you think of a brand as a lever or a mechanism to grow your organization, I think it helps to frame some of the activities around that. So I'm not going to go too much through all of this. I think I've spoken about it. It's all about being intentional and being mindful of how we show up. So I'm going to pause there for a second. I'm going to just take this off so that I can see the chat. It's a lot, but are there any key questions? Right.
Um, I don't see any questions right now, Meg, but I do think that if people want to ask a question, maybe this could be a time for you to unmute yourself and ask a question. If not, then we can just carry on.
I'll give people a moment to put it in the chat if they need. But I suppose the first part of the session today was really just if we can all work towards the language that brands brands are really about building trust, and brand is a very interesting mechanism to grow the organization. Hopefully that that ticks the first section of today. So all of that is fabulous and wonderful, but it doesn't quite give us any inkling into what to do and how to start this process. So again, very, very initial and cursory branding 101 methodologies or some of the principles is the first interaction that we often go through with an organization or a brand who comes into our world is, what is your single-minded message? And this idea of a single-minded message, often the pushback is not possible. My organization is complex. We've got many offerings. We've got various stakeholders. We do this for this person and that for that person, and it's just very complex. And we'll say, all right, absolutely, we understand that. But branding 101, discipline 101 is that it is possible for every organization to come up with a single-minded message that is really that top-line guiding thought that then helps us to create and structure messaging underneath it. So I've been bold. I'm not sure cars is always the way to go, but they are some of the world's biggest brands, so we're going to give it a bash. I understand it's a large forum today, so I won't ask everyone to shout out the answers. But just for a little bit of fun, if I put the Volvo, the Merc, and the BMW logos up here, take a bash in your own mind, and if you're brave, you can pop it in the chat. I want you to articulate a word, or maybe we can push it and take it to a phrase that articulates each of these brands, okay? So what is Volvo's single-minded message? All the countries, all the spaces and places in the world that they live, what is the central thing they want you to know? Okay? So whoever guessed safety or similar is spot on. Okay. My question would be, how on earth, given the multiple languages, the multiple evidence points that they have, do they get a global organization to represent a single word? Okay. It means it's possible. Mercedes-Benz. Any Mercedes-Benz drivers on the call today might have a different view, but Mercedes-Benz, however they say it and wherever they say it, they represent status. Okay, they do it in slightly different ways, but they are very sure that part of the reason you're buying a Mercedes-Benz is because of the status of that brand. And then just for fun, an oldie but a goodie is BMW for many years used a singular phrase. And I acknowledge while I'm presenting like this, I can't see the chat, so I'm not monitoring that. But there was a phrase that they used in a lot of their campaigns and a lot of their communication over the years. And any guesses? Sheer driving pleasure. So anyone who guessed that. So again, a little bit of fun, and I've intentionally chosen a category and products that are very different to the spaces and places I know your organizations are operating in. But I think it is intended to prove the art of the possible. That if these large global organizations can get us to believe a singular thought, and articulate it in different ways across the globe, that probably we can do it too. Another exercise that helps to articulate this point, and all of this is really introductory, but what we're trying to do today is just give some tools and some things to think about as you're going about this journey of building your own brands. Often what we do, and it's fabulous when we get to be in a room together to do this, but we can I will narrate the idea for today, is imagine I'm standing in front of you with a handful of tennis balls, all right? And then I usually choose the most sporty and confident looking individual in the room. I haul them up and I proceed to throw the entire lot of tennis balls at them. Obviously, it's all a bit of fun and then we all have a laugh. And the likelihood is maybe even the most dexterous among us can catch one or two. It's fun, it's frivolous, but it articulates a very important point. And the point is that we do this all the time as communicators. What we do is we've got so much important stuff to say, and particularly with the impact of the work that we do in this for good space, is we want to, when we get an opportunity, We want to throw as many tennis balls at the target audience at a single time. A large part of the discipline of branding is starting to sort through those tennis balls and sort through how we can have a discipline and gather ourselves as the communicator, structure those, organize those. What is the most important one we want to say? Maybe one or two sub messages. All right. And then generally what we do is we redo the exercise. I'll take one or two or three tennis balls and very thoughtfully, one at a time, throw them at the individual, and hey presto, they catch them. So it's a fun exercise, but it's very useful, especially if you've got larger teams and you've got various people within your organization articulating your brand and your message. Talk to them about this concept of the discipline of communication sits with the communicator, not the person who it's landing on. It's not my job as the person receiving the funding proposal or receiving the advert served to me on social media or in a print format. It's not my job to try and figure out who you are, what you do, read all the fine print. It's my job as the person creating that piece of communication to be so considered and so thoughtful that you can very easily pick up and understand what I'm saying. So again, a little bit of fun as an exercise, but it is extremely helpful. And in our organization, we've been doing this for 25 years. We'll often sit around a table, brainstorm, and go, we've too many tennis balls in the air, too many tennis balls. What can we take out? What can we take away from this so that we really hit the mark with what we want to say? A little bit of fun, and hopefully the internet plays along, but I'll show you another. Again, it's an oldie but a goodie. I love this brand. It's a big bank. You may have thoughts about the brand, but look at what they do. And again, I'll ask you if you want to at the end, put one single word in the chat after you've watched this ad.
What is this about big? You know, seeing the big picture, having the big idea, clinching the big deal. Nobody wants to clinch the little deal. Who wants to do that? Be a little deal clincher, a small shot. You know, when you go and get a burger, you want a Big Mac. You go to the fun fair, you ride a Big Dipper. You turn on TV and you see Big Bird, or you're afraid of the big bad wolf. When I was growing up, I wanted to be the big man. I never wanted to be the little man. Even the little man wanted to be the big man. You go to America, you want to go to the Big Apple, not the Little Apple. I get up in the morning, I want a big breakfast. I want my girlfriend to say, "Good morning, big boy," to which I'll reply, "I've got a big day today, a big meeting with the big chiefs from a big studio. It's a big time for the big bucks." And she'll turn to me, rolling her big blue eyes and say, "Big head." I'll retort, "What's the big deal?" Give her a big kiss. Then I'll get into my big car, set off into the big wide world. She'll give me a big wave, close the door of our big house, look in the mirror and ask herself, "Does my bum look big in this?" In my big meeting, I'll turn to one of the big hitters and I'll say, "I love this movie. It's got to be big. There's only one small problem. My fee. I'd like it to be, what's the word?
Megs, you muted. There you go.
Sorry, no worries. Hopefully you all saw and heard that. So you can see there was lots of evidence points. They talk about number of ATMs and they talk about its syndicated loans. And they had lots of text coming up on screen. But hopefully the thing that you remember about that is that they were big. And so again, fun exercise. And I know the spaces and places your organizations are playing are very different. But often what's helpful is to use an exercise what we call the billboard exercise. And again, you can write it down, you can just think it through in your own mind, but perhaps for 2 minutes or 1 minute, imagine a scenario where I said to you, all right, I have got fabulous funder X, and they have decided to give you 20 billboards across South Africa, prime space, everything from the airport to highways to every mall. But here's the trick. They're billboards, okay? And so we don't have a funding proposal. We don't have a lengthy print ad or even a social media campaign. I've got the space of a billboard. You've got the space of a billboard to articulate to the whole of South Africa what you do. From a branding perspective, best practice branding for out of home is 8 words or less. Okay, so again, just for fun, and this is hard. This takes many creative minds a long time. So don't feel bad if it is somewhat daunting. But can you articulate what your organization does in 8 words or less? So for a bit of fun, if you're brave enough, take a moment and just write 8 words. Could actually be a picture, to be honest, but for today, that's probably a bit tricky to achieve in a Teams chat. But if there's one or two who could take it a bash, you could give it a bash. Oh, and I'm so sorry, the video of Big Ad didn't play, only the soundtrack. Okay, maybe we must try it again.
Yeah, I was going to say if we can try replay it, Meg, or alternatively, if you can just share the link with us so that people can actually get to watch it, because I'm not sure if it's the network that's caused the lag with the sound and the video.
Okay, I will pop, let me pop it here. Check that it's not doing anything funny. Okay, I will pop it in the link shortly. Okay, is everyone having a think? Any brave souls, 8 words or less? Right, pause up. Donate your extra breast milk, save babies' lives. Love it. Donate your extra breast. You did it, 8 words, I love it. Denzel, empower, collaborate, enhance, develop. Okay, so Denzel, and it's purely because we're all in the learning mode here. I will ask you what your organization does, because those words, empower, collaborate, enhance, and develop, love them, but many people can claim them. So again, as a learning exercise, how can we articulate that in a way that only your organization could do? St. Luke's for the best holistic palliative care, love it. Helping children from Alex cross the freeway, great. Oh, now they're coming. Now they're coming. Love, care, hope, changing children's lives. Help a graduate get a job, creating opportunities for people with disabilities. Okay, so I love it. I love it. My feedback, and this is often, and it relates to one of my next points, is being single-minded is absolutely the starting point. It helps us organize our thinking. But if we think back to that formula of reliability and delight, some of these, and this is tricky, guys, so this is not me, this is hopefully constructive and positive feedback and an indication of how hard this can sometimes be, is if we get stuck in reliability, we don't differentiate ourselves. So take those beautiful thoughts, take the essence of that thing that you do, but now articulate it to me in a way that only your organization could claim. So do you have a way of doing it? Do you just have a slogan that people come to know you by? Not asking for the answers in this call. It really is just to articulate some of the thinking processes that we go through. But if I've got those 8 words, how are they only about what my organization can do? Deb saying within 8 words. Yep, it's tricky, it's hard. We're definitely not going to solve it in this call today, but those are the briefs that certainly land on my table. Is I've got out of home space. Someone's given me a free billboard. Can you help us? Can you tell us? Visuals often help to tell the story. They say a picture is 1,000 words. I love that individual who said, the picture of the prem baby. So absolutely, words are a component of it, but maybe you need a key visual. But But this is where the rubber hits the road, and this is really where I think branding can become so interesting. It takes organization months, weeks, years to articulate these kinds of things. But give it a try, even if it's in your next planning session or your leadership meeting or just in a thoughtful space in your own mind. Have a think about what that single-minded message could look like for your organization and how you could use that in a way that is very unique to you. All right, so if we take that as a kind of guiding principle number one, that often what big brands do at the highest level is they come up with a single-minded message for their brand. Sometimes people call it a tagline. Some people frame it more in the campaign sense of it being a campaign line, but there is a single thought that guides all the actions in one direction. The next task that we do then is a real mapping exercise at the heart of it, and we call it put the customer at the center. I'm acutely aware that that language of customer is not appropriate for everyone. So you may want to put the donor at the center. You may put whoever the decision maker is. It could be government. It could be a partner organization. It could be any stakeholder that is important. Put them at the center of your thinking. It could be your beneficiaries. It could be anyone. But just again, as an exercise, if you were to take your organization, you were to take this idea of a single-minded message, how do you then start expanding that into what we would start to say is a messaging framework or some kind of messaging hierarchy that is appropriate per channel? So brands don't say the exact thing in the exact way across every channel, but definitely it all has that same flavor, and it all has what we call the golden thread of that single-minded message weaved across it. So some of them, and absolutely this is not exhaustive by any means, so please, we could spend a whole day doing this exercise, and we often do. But just again, in your own mind, if you start to put your core thought, your core single-minded message, your brand essence at the center, how could that show up in the digital space? How could that show up on your website? How does it show up on your social media platforms? How does it show up in your funding proposals? If someone looked at a funding proposal and they looked on your website, are you using the same language? Do you use the same way to articulate what you do? Language is hugely important. Do you say the same types of things? Do you call it the same types of things? Public relations. If someone were to write an article about you, how would they describe you? Would they articulate it in the same way? And can you say to them, these are the core messages we want to get across. We do this. We do it in this way. This is what we call ourselves. This is the category we find ourselves in. Hugely important. How do you train your staff members, your partners to represent your organization? We know the idea of an elevator pitch, been around forever, but that elevator pitch is such a beautiful principle, because the thinking goes that if you start, let's say you're at a 10-story building, you start at floor 1 and you've got between floor 1 and floor 10 to tell, I don't know, call it biggest donor that you've been after for the last couple of years, what your organization is and why they should choose you. Could you have a single kind of hymn statement that you could, in a minute, anyone in your organization, you could throw everything from your intern to your CEO in that elevator, and at floor 10, the receiver of the communication would pop out with the same ideas in their head. So really important around how you articulate that single-minded thought from a staff and a partner perspective. How do you show up in printed material? Again, does it have the same flavor to it? I'm by no means suggesting that we use a single line forevermore across every channel in the same way, but it can definitely have the same flavor to it. Think about industry events, thought leadership. Often there is a spokesperson or there is a person who represents the organization, very knowledgeable about your category. How is that individual representing not only their individual expertise, but your brand as well. Again, are they throwing a single line in there each time that ties them to the brand? Are they championing a specific way of thinking or a methodology that directly links back to your brand? Oh, we do it this way. Again, so I suppose what this exercise helps brands and organizations start to do is absolutely we got to have that one thing that's guiding us and pushing us all in the same direction. But then the heavy lifting comes in how not to lose that, but give it a flavor across the multiple different channels and the spaces and places you're playing in. And a very key tip, or it's more than a tip, when organizations approach us, during this exercise, what becomes acutely important is not just to talk about the what, but to talk about who. Who in your organization is going to be what we would often call a brand custodian? You could call it many different things. Who's going to have their eye on all of these balls? Often it's the founder because they understand the brand and they live the brand. But who is peeping their head over the fence, looking at the social media, making sure that that feels like your funding proposals, making sure that feels like how you show up if people write an article about you. How are you giving toolkits and one pages and little brand story on a page in your leadership meetings and your staff meetings and goes, okay, guys, this is who we are. This is what we sound like. Often in big organizations, they call them the brand police. Such a terrible word because it sounds punitive, but there is an individual whose entire job is to go, is our story straight? Are we saying it correctly? And do we look the same? These big organizations, you don't just decide to pluck a different color on your PowerPoint or throw in a different font because you feel like it's appropriate. There are guidelines and you stick to them. And you stick to them no matter what country you're in, no matter whether you're internal or external facing. And slowly, slowly, we start to build this consistency of a brand. So again, I'm aware of time, so I'll keep going for today. But I think this is a hugely important mapping exercise around how you take that single-minded message and convey it in the different channels. All right. I'm just going to let the questions trickle in the chat. And from a timing perspective, I will push forward. So it's a lot, and I know it's quite theoretical, and it's really trying to put a very what is sometimes nebulous and complex discipline into 45 minutes or into an hour. But if there's 3 or 4 things you think about after today, I would really ask you to think about what makes your organization different. What can only you offer? Okay, I'm aware that not each offering or service is unique in and of itself, but often it's about what you can claim. Some of you can claim legacy and heritage. You can claim that you've been doing this for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. Some of you can claim that the way you do it is really interesting and different, that you use a very specific evidence-based methodology around how you approach some of the problems that you're solving in the world. Some is just about really shouting very, very loud about what you do and claiming what we would call a leadership position in the market. So make sure when everyone thinks about X, they think about your brand. It's just about shouting at the loudest and claiming that space. So how can we think about what makes you different and what only you can offer? I think outside of that is once you've had that thought process, how can you articulate that in a single statement that creates consistency across all your communication channels? And then the real slog and the heavy lifting is taking that thought process and mapping it out across channels and weaving in that common thread. And that very, very delicate balance of it becoming stale and monotonous, and treading that line of still keeping the delight, still keeping it exciting, but making sure that if I took the logo off all of your stuff. If I took the logo off your website, I took a logo off a billboard or a street pole ad, I took the logo of your funding proposal and I gave it to someone and I said, are all of these things from the same place? Both visually and the language that you use, would someone understand that you're a family, that all of this collateral lives in the same home? Then we're on the way to branding. And again, it's just really being intentional about how we show up and walking that line. So I think that's at a very high level, what we would call branding 101. What I also wanted to do today is because I think this idea of being introspective about our own organizations and coming up with content and collateral, often when we have so much invested and such a love for the thing that we do, we have to do this with the lens of who is our target audience and who are we trying to speak to. So what I thought might be helpful is, a while ago we did a piece of research, because often this is the day job, right? People come to us and they say, the way to grow my organization, as always, is around securing funding. We've tried all sorts, we've knocked on all the doors, but we want to understand how this idea of a brand can help us get funding. So no problem, we go through all the exercises and many, many more, and we start methodically to build this brand. But what we often found was missing in our own thinking was, what do funders want to hear? How does a funder really think? When that funding proposal lands on the desk or the donor goes onto your website, what do they want to see? So it was a large report, but again, I will want to present a smattering of key insights for today, because I think it's very, very helpful in how we frame some of these things. So I call it the Fine Five, again, to try and follow my own rules of the tennis balls, trying to condense something into 5 thoughts that you can keep on your hand. Thought number 1 is that actually givers or funders or donors, we can call them whatever we like, they really think like investment bankers. Okay, so imagine you are presenting yourself to an investment banker, and these are their words, not our words. They want to back a winning horse. Okay. They want returns, financial and non-financial. So that's very interesting in that they want to understand how this organization is going to succeed at the thing they're doing. Don't just tell me what you're doing, but tell me why you are doing this cleverly, more efficiently, in a different way, at scale. Tell me why this investment, and it really is an investment, is best spent on your organization. And I think coupled with that, a very interesting trap, and I cannot tell you how many times I've got caught into this, is funders don't want, they are acutely aware often of the level of need and the scale of need out there. But they don't just want to hear about the abyss, right? What they want to hear is framing it why your organization is the solution to that. They are aware of whether we're in climate change or hunger or maternal health or non-communicable diseases, whatever it may be. We know the problems. We are acutely aware of the problems. How are you framing why you are the solution to that problem? And again, don't only think about the what, but the who in your organization. Can you use to advocate and create scripts, create role play scenarios with your individuals that frame why you are the guys that are going to make a dent in this very, very big, whatever the category is that you're in. Again, third point, and this was fascinating, is often the ask from a financial perspective can be somewhat nebulous. We all fall into this trap of give me however much you've got, I'll take it, right? And I think what was very interesting is that donors, particularly at the high level, some of these foundations, they are giving out big grants. They want to know what does the package look like and how is it scalable? And some of the language they used was interesting. Is you're the incubator, you, meaning the NGO, is the incubator. It's this contained house. The funder is the oxygen flow. So tell me as the donor, where is the beginning and the end of the ask in this particular proposal? Acutely aware that the ask is large, and for sure we'll all take as much as we can get, because that's how you make the difference. But very, very interesting for the proposals and for funding documents is package a product or a offering for the donors. We have got a pilot project that we need this much for. We are going to do X, Y, and Z, and based on the performance of this, we are planning to scale it in this and this and this way. Here's how much we need for A, here's how much we need for B, C, and D. I'm simplifying it, and again, I know everyone's environment is slightly different, but I think if you think about that packaged concept, and you can even say, right, package A is for one of these, we would like to do 100 of them. Then they know, okay, I'm giving you this much times that. It helps people understand the specifics of what they're giving to. Often if you have milestones that you're using to fundraise, you've got a birthday, for example, or you're raising around a specific event in a calendar, make the ask very specific. If you've got 10 things you want to raise for, pick 1 or 2 at the most and say, we are raising to get X for project Y, and everyone builds to that. So again, we know these principles, but I think sometimes we can often get lost in the negative and the size of the problem as opposed to why we are the solution. And then a very interesting thing is what we call follow the money. Is look in your networks when we, and this is funders speaking, they're saying often people will come to them, haven't really done the research around how the funder is a match for that organization. So do the work and see who in your network potentially is your first port of call. And if nothing comes up there, be very aware of looking at the trends around you, because funding has cycles. We know this. Everyone's looking at climate change. Everyone's looking at non-communicable diseases, whatever it may be. How can you fit your ask into that script, into that season of funding? We're not saying be disingenuous in any way, shape, or form, but how can you match? How can you match yourself to the funder that you're talking to? And then the last one, very important, absolutely givers, whether they are individuals giving in a personal capacity or large foundations or funders, they want to be recognized and showcased. And at the smallest level, that could just be a nod and a recognition. But at the highest level, what is most interesting to some of these large funders is how they can be associated with category change. How can you show them that this, your idea, your way of doing it differently, your methodology, your approach is going to really allow step change in the category that you're playing in, not just incremental growth. Often, if we can articulate that, and many of you are doing it, but if you can articulate it and capture it on a page, they will be very interested in associating their names with something that big. So again, I know it's a lot and I want to be mindful of time. I think I've got 4 minutes left. So hopefully I followed my own process. But lastly, I did mention to you that I've chosen quite a wild card example, and please let my internet help me out and work. But often people will say to us, but not Meg, it's just we too complex. What we do is it's tough and we get stuck in the weeds of kind of day-to-day communication. And I'm acutely aware that budgets and all sorts come into play here, but just as a way of ending off with the art of the possible, I wanted to show you, as I said, a cat food brand. I would have loved to be in the brainstorm of this campaign and how on earth they went from cat food to what I'm about to show you. But I think what was interesting here is how they created something delightful, how they created something memorable, and how they linked this product that they offer into kind of this climate space that the world's in right now. So this is a bit of fun, and hopefully it plays. Zamo, can you just give me the thumbs up if you can see what's on screen? Fabulous. Here we go. Why is it not going? Hold on one sec. You know, tech, you can test it as many times as you like, but it'll still not play. Okay. I'm going to pop the link in the chat, but essentially what that was is what this cat food brand did is they created the word hope. Hopefully you can even just, if I just share it on screen, you can see the coral reef there. They constructed, imagine a scaffolding. They constructed scaffolding in the ocean that then the coral grew around. And that the scaffolding was in the shape of the word hope. And what they did is then that was the campaign that they spoke about how this brand who was taking fish out of the ocean to use in their product was giving back to the ocean. Again, I'll pop the link in the chat, but I thought it was such an interesting and such a different way that an organization was putting itself into the world. I am very sure that people, when they saw this, thought about the brand very, very differently. So yeah, so again, not a copy paste for the spaces and places that your organizations are in, but just a beautiful idea of the art of the possible. And I will absolutely put that link in the chat. So that's all from me. I know that we've come to the 11 o'clock, the end of our session. If I could ask you one more thing is, as always, I think feedback and insight gathering is hugely important to us. So I'm going to pop a link. Oh, now it's decided to work. Anyway, I'm giving up with technology. I will share the link in the chat. But the last link that I will share is just a little bit of feedback to us. As I said, we do have additional modules and we do have some more kind of methodologies and toolkits that we use. Just as a matter of interest, it would be really great to see what might be helpful to your organizations, maybe what was missing from today, and how additionally we can support you if appropriate. So that's all from me. I will also pop my details in the link if you want to ask any additional questions or for any additional insights. So thank you. Thanks for the time.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Megan. I think that was such a great Sorry, I just accidentally muted myself. I think even I also just learned quite a bit. I think it's also so great to be in a room, online room with someone who's an expert in the industry. I think it's been quite insightful and we've all enjoyed it. And hopefully we can do another one, Megs. I think it's been really great. And I think there's a real huge hunger and interest in this topic. So definitely, guys, thank you so much, everybody for joining us. I think it's been a great session. As Megan mentioned, she will be popping in a link on the chat, just so you guys can just kind of give feedback, because we do want to kind of do a bit more sessions with Megs and her team. So we kind of want to know what are the things that interest you guys? What can we do a bit better in future? What else can we kind of put emphasis on that you feel like from the session we need to kind of focus a bit more on? But yeah, just a big thank you to the guys at Fine for Good. It was a fantastic session. I think we've all really thoroughly enjoyed the session and we're looking forward to many more. And I see a lot of thank yous in the chat as well, Mix. So really great session and really appreciate it. Everybody, thank you again for joining in on today's session. Please feel free to pop any questions that you may have. I will be sharing the link and the recording to this poster session. I'll be loading it up on our YouTube page, and then I'll share it with you guys, so you can also have access to this to kind of rewatch. Maybe if you want to kind of look at information and figure out what you want to ask Meg's poster session. But again, just a big thank you to you, Megan, and thank you to you guys for Good Courses for being able to join the session. Really appreciate it, and looking forward to the next one next month. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Go well. Have a lovely rest of the day. Ciao.
Cheers, cheers. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Gwena. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Zamo. Thank you, team. Thank you, Megan. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Bye-bye.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Megan and the team. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot.
Thanks,
Yes.
Desmond. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was great.
Thanks, Paul. Really appreciate it.
Sorry, just to check the For Good
Yes.
link on YouTube. I've tried to
Yes,
check on
Albert.
YouTube some time back, but I can't find it on
I will
YouTube. But
share the link when I send the email. I'll just share the link to the actual page, and then you'll be able just to connect to the YouTube page, because I don't have it handy with me now, Albert. I can also WhatsApp it to you after this.
okay, thank you so much.
No worries at all, Albert.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much, Zamo.
Thank you, Zola. Thank you so much, guys. Thanks, Megs. I just saw the thing. I'll just add it on my email, so everybody else who's kind of left the call, I'll add it on my mail that I'll send out
Perfect.
post this. But yeah, really appreciate it. Let
Thank
me
you.
actually stop the
Sorry.
recording so that we can chat as well.
Okay, no
Let me
problem.
just stop that,
Yeah.
and then everybody's leaving the room, and we
Deal.
can just kind of do a quick chat.